let's talk about curling. Is there anybody in the world that can beat us?
Well, you know what?
Are we the king of the castle, and everybody else is the dirty rascal? I mean, are we the guys?
I think so. I think it's certainly a sport that's been dominated by curling, especially this Olympics. We saw Canada really run the table. And not just win, but win convincingly. Even though, you know what, if you look back at the history of this event, it was the first gold in Canadian curling for a while. So I think right now, curling is at a level in Canada where it is that much ahead of the competition, even though that is a relatively new thing. It has not always been like, it's not like, U.S., Canada women's hockey where they're going to be in the gold medal game every year because no one else can compete. This is a new phenomenon now where curling in Canada is just dominating.
Yeah, but curling in Canada, and I'm not going to be full of shit and say that I know. I've always seen it. The big CBC's always done a big job, and even the bounce field. What do they call it? What's the big tournament in Canada?
Oh, you got the Brier Tournament of Hearts. You got a couple big ones, right?
Another one, and there's the Brier, and there's another one. There's another big one. But so I've watched it every once in a while, but not to the extent of the intensity that this is. And I want to ask both of you guys a couple of things. Number one. Do you think that the Brits, the men's curling team threw in the towel? Has that ever been done before? Why did they just concede? Was there completely, absolutely no chance of them having a chance to get back in or upsetting the Canadians? Is that why they said, forget about it, and they conceded?
I think the way it works in curling is that when you're behind by so much that it's impossible to make up that kind of ground, then the match is just conceded. Yeah, so it's 9-3 in the ninth end. If it's impossible for the opponent to catch you, they just call the match there.
Yeah, and I don't know whether they have a specific number in mind, but they do decide that this game is over, and obviously it's conceded by both sides, so that's how they did it. And you talking about the popularity of curling, Frank, Jennifer Jones probably curled as well as she ever has in her life yesterday to beat the Swedes. She carried her second and third on her back. I was following the synopsis after the curling, and they were overwhelmed by how well she curled. Otherwise, Sweden wins that going away.
Yeah.
So I don't think we have any dominance in curling. It's our first women's gold since '98, and I don't know how many of the men have won, but they haven't won on a consistent basis. And Jacobs came from back in the pack to win and did very nicely, beat Murdoch of Great Britain 9-3. So I don't think that curling is as dominant as it may appear after two golds. I think it's a coincidence that we look like a dominant curling nation when in fact we are just very good.
Well, I thought Jones dominated this tournament. You're right, Bill. I mean, when you look back, it was the first gold in a long time. But just watching, this Olympics, it certainly looked like Jones was that much better than pretty much everyone she was up against.
Yeah, I don't disagree, and I was only making the point about the game against the Swedes because
right, that one was tight.
Yeah, she was.
Yeah, guys, hear me out. I understand that. That's not the point I was trying to make. I was trying to make a point that the teams that played in this Olympic were extremely dominant. It was like nobody else in the world could touch them, right? And now I understand. If I understood correctly, what you communicated to me right now is you're reiterating to me that these teams were great. Some other Canadian teams in the past in world competition have had their issues, right?
Yep.
In winning, but for the point that you both made is that these teams are just two great teams with some great spectacular players. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I think that's fair, Frank, but I also say there have been as good a group of teams that have gone there before and have been beaten by the Europeans. I just don't buy the Canadian dominance. I buy Canada as a great curling country that can take its chances with all the rest, but Jennifer Jones
is a great curling country. The Swiss are a great curling country. And up until today, I did not know it strictly out of ignorance that Britain is another very, very strong country in curling. I did not know that Great Britain is very strong in curling. I did not know that. And wasn't that a champion team that Team Canada beat today, the men's?
Well, I think curling started in Scotland, so Britain's got a pretty good chance of getting some seepage. And I'm surprised too, Frank, when you say that Britain is very good in curling, and it might be. This Murdoch guy has been very effective in fact, I think he was in the last Olympics against Canada. But
he's from a champion team. If I was listening to the commentating from CBC, Eric, do you know anything of what I'm saying, or am I misunderstanding what they were saying in CBC? The guy, the Great Britain team, the guy was a reigning champion of his team. Did he win a medal someplace before?
Well,
to be honest, I'm not sure his history. And, like you, Frank, curling is not my area of expertise. I did catch some of the match. But, from what I saw, and especially, you look at, the score of that match, it was obviously very one-sided. And it looked today, watching it, that Canada was a much better team. I don't know the accolades that this Great Britain team had coming in. But I'd agree with you, Frank, that in this tournament, it clearly looked like Canada was the best team, both men's and women's, and they were that much better than all the competition that they faced.
Well, let's go to the women's team first. It looked like that lady. Give me the name, please, so I don't disrespect anybody. The who made all the shots for Team Canada?
Yeah, Jennifer Jones.
Jennifer Jones.
She was on a mission from God. She was completely psyched. And she's just unbelievable in her shots, and people think that it's just getting a stone, putting down your knee, and sliding it down, but you need a lot of eye-hand coordination and really understand also the scheming that goes on between the teams of where they're going to put the stones strategically, right? There's a lot of strategy.
Well, yeah, it's all about, having the hammer and everything else. It is strategy, you're right, because, certain situations you're able to steal points. In certain situations you're basically playing very defensive to make sure you're not putting yourself in a compromising position. And I think that if you watch Jones all tournament, she seemed to have her finger on the pulse of exactly what she was doing at all times. They didn't make any mistakes. That's the thing. You lose in curling when you make mistakes, and you allow your opponent to steal or to grab the hammer, do things like that. And I just didn't see anything wrong with what Jennifer Jones was doing the entire time.
No, she is this game a long time too. She's a veteran.
Yeah, well, she knows what she's doing.
But guys, is this like golf, where one day you have a great game, and even if you're an amateur, you feel good, you can hit the ball, and then another day it's like you've never played before? Is this game of curling the same way, where one day you can't throw the stone properly or get the weight done properly, and is that what happened to the Swedes?
Bill, what did you see wrong with the Swedes today?
With the Swedes in curling?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, they weren't that bad, and I was Martin, the guy from Canada, was one of the analysts after the game, and he was trying to point out that in spite of Canada's dominance of the tournament, which we all agreed to, they should not have won the final game, but for the skips' dominance of that whole game, because the second and third for Canada were just off their game and were carried throughout. So it was not the championship game was not as apparently dominant as we would like, but it was good enough to win. And that's, at the end of the day, as Mike Babcock says, I don't care whether I beat them by 1, 2, or 102. I just need one win.
Yeah, and you make a good point, Bill, because Canada, and I'll switch to hockey for a sec, has been up in arms over, 1-goal wins over Latvia, not playing well against, teams early in this tournament, needing overtime to beat Finland. But you know what? When you look at it, they outshot them, they outplayed them, they outchanced them, and the forwards weren't scoring a lot of goals. But
they out-strategized them. I think, in my modest opinion, as a total ignorant of knowledge of the game of curling, I would say that the Canadian women's team and the Canadian men's team, in my modest view, is they totally out-strategized them. Their strategy was bang on. They knew exactly what to do. They knew which way they were going with the game. And the opposing team, Great Britain, couldn't keep up with them, and neither could Sweden or Switzerland against the women's team. I watched the Swiss played, and they were totally dominated and outplayed by the Canadians. It was just amazing. And I think also it has to do with the announcer who covers this from CBC. He makes it an exciting game. He almost turns it into a hockey game the way he gets excited after the player throws the stone. They call them the stones?
The stones, yep.
The stones, right? Because it's bocce balls on ice, basically, right? Or shuffle on the hands. But it's an incredible game, and I've never seen how all these countries have these teams that are completely possessed and passionate about this game. And is this game, do you believe this game is going to continue growing and you're going to see younger and younger people in the sport?
Well, it's huge. Yeah, I mean, it's huge in Canada. I mean, I know we don't talk about it a lot, but I mean, you look at the passionate curling fans, especially, you know, West and things like that. They love this sport. I don't know about the way the world views it. I'm not, because, you know, obviously all the curling, as we talked about earlier, Frank, that we see is you know, Briar, so you're seeing all the provinces in Canada go at it. We're not really seeing what the world is doing with this sport. I know that in Canada it's going to continue to grow. Bill, what do you think as far as it growing worldwide? What do you think?
Well, I don't know enough about it, Eric. Like we're trying to. I like the game. I think that Western Canada is from Calgary to Winnipeg is the hotbed of curling. Everybody curls out west. They bring the wheat in the spring.
Northern Ontario, like Phil Esposito was a great curler. He did a lot of curling in the Sault Ste. Marie, and isn't most of the men's team that won the gold medal today from Sault Ste. Marie?
Yes, of course. Brad Jacobs is from Sault Ste. Marie, and good for him.
Yes.
But I don't think that we've ever sent a curler, male or female, to a major world event that they haven't competed well, Frank. They haven't embarrassed themselves.
Right.
There were far too many curlers in the Olympic competition that couldn't draw to the button. And they were missing open draws. They were missing open hits. That means you shouldn't be there. So they've got to find the countries that can at least send people who are capable players, because Canada can play with anybody, and they proved that in this Olympiad.